Harlem, November 14, 1955, 3:17 a.m. The basement beneath Red's Pool Hall on 147th Street. No windows, one bare bulb swinging from a wire like a hanged man's rope. The air tastes like fear and cigarette smoke that's been trapped for decades. Frank Lucas stands 6 feet from a wooden table. On that table, $47,000 in small bills, dirty money, blood money, Bumpy Johnson's money. But Frank isn't looking at the cash. He's looking at the man tied to the chair beside it, Samuel "Sammy" Reed, Bumpy's accountant for 8 years, father of 3, deacon at Abyssinian Baptist Church, and as of 6 hours ago, a dead man walking. Because Sammy Reed made the mistake every man makes in Harlem eventually. He thought he was smarter than the king. Behind Frank, in the corner where shadows gather like wolves, sits Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, 70 years old. Hands folded, face carved from stone. Watching. Not the money. Not Sammy. Frank. This is the test. The test Bumpy designed to separate kings from corpses, legends from forgotten names, empire builders from gravediggers. See, 3 hours ago, Bumpy handed Frank a 38 and 8 words that changed everything. Show me what you learned about pockets, son. Because for 6 months, Frank has been Bumpy's shadow, his student, his chosen heir, and for 6 months, Bumpy has been teaching him the most important lesson a man can learn in this business. Never trust a man with pockets. Frank's hand hovers near his waistband. The gun feels heavy. The room smells like copper and sweat, and the kind of desperation that makes good men do evil things. Sammy is crying now, begging, saying he can explain, saying his daughter needs medicine, saying the hospital wouldn't treat her without cash up front, saying he was going to bring the money back, saying anything that might buy him another 60 seconds of oxygen. But Frank isn't listening to the words. He's listening to the silence, because Bumpy Johnson didn't build a 20-year empire in Harlem by trusting men with loud mouths and deep pockets. He built it by watching, by testing, by knowing that loyalty isn't what a man says when the sun is shining, it's what he does when the lights go out and his back's against the wall. And right now, in this basement that smells like death and broken promises, Frank Lucas has a choice. He can do what every other hungry kid from North Carolina would do: put a bullet in the rat, prove he's a killer. Earn his stripes the way the streets expect, with blood on his hands and a body in the river. Or he can prove he understands what Bumpy really taught him. The lesson that separates kings from killers, empires from graveyards, legends from statistics. The lesson about pockets. Sammy's sobs echo off the concrete walls. The bare bulb swings. Bumpy hasn't moved, hasn't blinked, just watching. Because this isn't about $47,000. It's about whether Frank Lucas learned the difference between power and violence, between being feared and being respected, between ruling an empire and digging your own grave. In the next 4,000 words, you're going to discover exactly what happened in that basement. The test that would make Frank Lucas untouchable, and the chilling reason why a lesson about pockets would build the most sophisticated drug empire in American history. March 1955, 8 months before the basement. Before the sealed pockets and Sammy Reed's betrayal. Before Frank Lucas learned the difference between surviving and ruling. Harlem don't smile at strangers, it sizes you up, checks your hunger, your discipline, your willingness to bleed. Then it decides if you eat or get eaten. Frank steps off the Greyhound at 6:47 a.m. with $43 folded twice in his pocket, a cardboard suitcase held together with rope, and his cousin Ellsworth's address written on a grocery receipt. 24 years old, one body behind him in North Carolina, country dust still on his shoes, thinking that makes him dangerous. Harlem doesn't care what you did in Carolina. By noon, Frank discovers cousin Ellsworth moved to Philadelphia 6 months ago. The landlady at the rooming house laughs when Frank shows her the outdated address. She's seen 100 country boys with empty promises and emptier pockets. Most catch the next bus south. The ones who stay end up in Rikers or the morgue. Frank doesn't go to the bus station. Instead, he walks, studies, watches the ecosystem like a man learning a foreign language where every wrong word costs blood. He takes work where he finds it, numbers running for Willie Red. $12 a day carrying slips from tenement to tenement, collecting bets on the daily number, understanding that every runner is a target, and Willie Red don't pay hospital bills. But Frank isn't watching the money. Money comes and goes. He's watching the men who control it. The education accelerates fast. On 116th Street, he sees the flashy hustlers, silk suits and alligator shoes, gold chains catching sunlight like fishing lures. They move loud, laugh loud, spend loud. They need everyone to know they're eating. By evening, Frank notices half of them are gone, replaced by different faces wearing the same desperation. The loud man dies. Frank memorizes this, then he sees the other kind. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Not at first, nobody sees Bumpy at first, that's the point. While the flashy boys are performing on street corners, Bumpy moves through Harlem like smoke through a cracked window. No gold chains. No costume. Just a gray suit that costs more than most men make in a year, worn like work clothes. When Bumpy walks past, the air changes. Dice games slow down. Conversations soften. Men who never shut up suddenly find something interesting on the ground. People don't scatter. They straighten up. They remember their manners. This is the difference Frank studies. Fear versus respect. Being seen versus being remembered. Taking a neighborhood versus owning it. Bumpy is gravity, the center that everything else orbits around. And he never raises his voice above a whisper. The theory becomes practice on a Tuesday night outside the Lenox Lounge. Bumpy's hosting a card game in the back room. High stakes. Cash only. Frank is walking past after a 14-hour shift when he sees them, 3 men in ski masks. Summer heat, winter disguises. Shotguns that look stolen from a hardware store. Moving toward the side entrance with desperate confidence. Panic is contagious. The sidewalk empties. 30 people suddenly very interested in their shoes. Because in Harlem, you survive by being blind at the right moments. Everyone knows breathing wrong during a robbery gets you included in the body count. Frank doesn't look away. He doesn't think. Thinking gets you killed. There's a busted Buick at the curb with a tire iron in the gutter beside it. Frank picks it up, feels the weight. Cold metal, no safety, just decision. The lead robber has his back turned, focused on the door he's about to kick in. Frank takes 3 steps. No words, no warnings. The tire iron comes down once. The sound like a watermelon hitting pavement. Bone cracks. The man drops. His shotgun clatters across wet concrete. The second robber spins around too late. Frank's already swinging at his knee, another crack echoing off brick walls. The third man runs. Smart choice. Only smart choice. Frank stands over 2 bodies, tire iron still in his hand, breathing steady. No adrenaline, no panic, just a country boy who understood that action beats hesitation every time. The door opens. Bumpy Johnson steps out. 70 years old, but moving like he forgot to age. He looks at the bodies, looks at Frank, looks at the tire iron. 30 seconds of silence that weighs like 30 years. Why didn't you run? Bumpy's voice is quiet. Power doesn't need volume. Frank could lie, could say he was being heroic, but something about Bumpy's eyes tells him lies have a price in this conversation. Running means you got something to hide. I got nothing to hide from nobody. Bumpy nods slowly. Studying. Calculating. seeing something most men miss. Right there, the line gets drawn. Flash versus substance. Noise versus silence. Men who live for tonight versus men planning 10 years ahead. Bumpy reaches into his jacket. Frank tenses, but his hand emerges with a brown paper bag. Heavy. Tempting. $500, Bumpy says, more than you've seen in your life. Stand on the corner of 125th and Lenox tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Don't open the bag. Don't move. Don't talk to nobody. Just stand. 12 hours. Frank takes the bag, feels the weight of money and possibility. You do that, Bumpy continues, maybe you ain't nobody no more. The country boy's baptism is over. His real education is about to begin, and Frank Lucas walks toward 125th Street, not knowing every step pulls him deeper into a world where loyalty has a price and every test costs more than the last. March 15, 1955, 6:47 a.m. Frank Lucas steps off the Greyhound at Port Authority with $43 folded twice in his pocket, a cardboard suitcase held together with rope, and his cousin Ellsworth's address written on a grocery receipt that's already 3 months old. 24 years old. One body behind him in North Carolina, country dust still on his shoes. Harlem doesn't smile at strangers. It sizes you up like a butcher examining meat. Checks your hunger, your discipline, your willingness to bleed for respect or die for stupidity. By noon, Frank discovers cousin Ellsworth moved to Philadelphia 6 months ago. The landlady at the rooming house on 134th Street laughs when Frank shows her the outdated address. She's seen 100 country boys with empty promises and emptier pockets. Most catch the next bus south with their tails between their legs. The ones who stay end up in Rikers Island or the morgue within 90 days. Frank doesn't go to the bus station. Instead, he walks. Studies. Watches the ecosystem like a man learning a foreign language where every wrong word costs blood. He takes work where he finds it, numbers running for Willie Red at $12 a day, carrying betting slips from tenement to tenement, collecting action on the daily number, understanding that every runner is a moving target and Willie Red doesn't pay hospital bills. But Frank isn't watching the money. Money comes and goes like seasons. He's watching the men who control the weather. The education accelerates fast. On 116th Street, he sees the flashy hustlers in their silk suits and alligator shoes. Gold chains catching sunlight like fishing lures, drawing attention from blocks away. They move loud, laugh loud, spend loud. They need everyone to know they're eating good. By evening, Frank notices half of them are gone, replaced by different faces wearing the same desperation, the same hunger, the same death sentence. The loud man dies. Frank memorizes this like scripture. Then he sees the other kind. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Not at first, nobody sees Bumpy at first. That's the entire point. While the flashy boys are performing on street corners like circus acts, Bumpy moves through Harlem like smoke through a cracked window. No gold chains, no costume jewelry. Just a gray wool suit that costs more than most men make in 6 months, worn like work clothes. When Bumpy walks past, the air changes. Dice games slow down. Conversations drop to whispers. Men who never shut up suddenly find something fascinating about their shoes. People don't scatter. They straighten up. They remember their manners. This is the difference Frank studies with the intensity of a scholar. Fear versus respect. Being seen versus being remembered. Taking a neighborhood versus owning it completely. Bumpy is gravity, the center that everything else orbits around, and he never raises his voice above a whisper. The theory becomes practice on Tuesday, November 8th, outside the Lenox Lounge. Bumpy's hosting a high-stakes card game in the back room. Cash only, no credit, no mercy. Frank is walking past after a 14-hour shift when he spots them, 3 men in ski masks during summer heat. Shotguns that look stolen from a hardware store, moving toward the side entrance with desperate confidence and sweaty hands. Panic spreads like wildfire. The sidewalk empties faster than a theater during a fire drill. 30 people suddenly very interested in their shoes, their watches, anything except what's about to happen. Because in Harlem you survive by being blind at the right moments. Seeing the wrong thing gets you included in the body count. Frank doesn't look away. He doesn't think. Thinking gets you killed when bullets start flying. There's a busted Buick at the curb with a tire iron lying in the gutter beside it. Frank picks it up. Feels the weight. Cold metal. No safety. No second chances. Just decision and consequence. The lead robber has his back turned, focused on the door he's about to kick in. Frank takes 3 silent steps. No warnings. No negotiations. The tire iron comes down once with the sound of a watermelon hitting pavement. Bone cracks. The man drops like a sack of cement. His shotgun clatters across wet concrete, spinning like a compass needle. The second robber spins around too late. Frank's already swinging at his kneecap. Another crack echoing off brick walls. The third man runs without looking back. Smart choice. Only smart choice available. Frank stands over 2 bodies, tire iron still in his hand, breathing steady as a metronome. No adrenaline rush, no panic, no celebration. Just a country boy who understood that action beats hesitation every single time. The door opens. Bumpy Johnson steps out. 70 years old, but moving like he forgot to age. He looks at the bodies, looks at Frank, looks at the tire iron. 30 seconds of silence that weighs like 30 years of judgment. Why didn't you run? Bumpy's voice is quiet as a funeral prayer. Frank could lie. Could say he was being heroic. Could claim he was protecting the community. But something about Bumpy's eyes, ancient, calculating, patient as death, tells him lies have a price in this conversation that he can't afford to pay. Running means you got something to hide. I got nothing to hide from nobody. Bumpy nods slowly. Studying. Calculating. Seeing something most men miss completely. Right there, on that blood-stained sidewalk, the line gets drawn in permanent ink. Flash versus substance. Noise versus silence. Men who live for tonight versus men planning 10 years ahead. Bumpy reaches into his jacket. Frank tenses, but the hand emerges with a brown paper bag, heavy, tempting, dangerous. $500, Bumpy says, more money than you've seen in your entire life. Stand on the corner of 125th and Lenox tomorrow morning. 6 'em sharp. Don't open the bag, don't move from that spot, don't talk to nobody about nothing. Just stand there like a statue. 12 hours. Frank takes the bag. Feels the weight of money and possibility and the first test of many. You do that without complaint or question, Bumpy continues, eyes never leaving Frank's face. Maybe you ain't nobody no more. Maybe you somebody worth teaching. The country boy's baptism is over. The real education, the kind that separates kings from corpses, is about to begin, and Frank Lucas walks toward 125th Street. Not knowing every step pulls him deeper into a world where loyalty has a price, silence has power, and every lesson costs more than the last. November 14, 1955. The warehouse on Amsterdam Avenue sits empty as a tomb. $75,000 in pure heroin vanished between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. No broken locks, no kicked doors, no witnesses. Too clean, too professional, too inside. Bumpy Johnson doesn't rage. Kings don't throw tantrums. He sits alone in his back office at Sugar Ray's, peeling an orange with surgical precision. One continuous strip of skin curling onto his desk like a question mark. The warehouse keys hang on a ring beside his ashtray. 5 keys, 5 men who had access, 5 pulsable rats. He circles one word on a piece of paper, pockets. Then he makes 5 phone calls. That evening, the back room of Red's pool hall transforms into a courtroom where the judge, jury, and executioner wear the same face. The air tastes like fear and stale cigarettes. A single bare bulb swings from a wire, casting shadows that dance like guilty consciences. Frank arrives first, taking his usual seat 2 chairs from Bumpy's right. Close enough to hear whispers, far enough to avoid suspicion. Then comes Sammy Reed, the accountant, 42 years old, deacon at Abyssinian Baptist, father of 3 daughters who need their daddy to come home breathing. 8 years with Bumpy. Trusted with every number, every transaction, every secret that could bury them all. Pretty boy Walker struts in next. Silk suit the color of money, gold teeth catching light like warning signals. He handles collections and discipline with equal enthusiasm. Flashy, but effective. Loud, but loyal. Or so Bumpy believed until yesterday. Quiet Jimmy Torres enters like smoke. Numbers boss who runs the policy banks from 110th to 145th Street. Speaks maybe 10 words per week, but those words move mountains of cash. His silence makes him valuable. His silence might also make him dangerous. Big Mike Washington fills the doorway before squeezing through. 6'5", 300 pounds of loyalty wrapped in a cheap suit. Hands like cinder blocks. Brain like a calculator. Muscle with a mathematics degree from the streets. Bumpy doesn't pace. Doesn't threaten. Doesn't raise his voice above a whisper that somehow fills the room like thunder. One of y'all got pockets full of my money, he begins, placing another orange slice on the table. I ain't asking who. I'm telling you I know. But first, let me teach y'all something about human nature. He leans forward. The temperature drops 10 degrees. The theory of pockets. Every man got pockets. God gave us hands to work. But the devil gave us pockets to hide things. An honest man keeps his hands visible. On tables. In the air. Working. But a thief? A thief lives in his pockets. Always touching. Always checking. Making sure what he stole is still there. It's a reflex. Like breathing. Bumpy gestures to the mahogany surface between them. Empty them. Everything. Right now. Frank goes first. Wallet with $23. Car keys. A receipt from Sylvia's restaurant. Clean. Honest. Transparent. Pretty boy makes it performance art. Gold lighter. Diamond pinky ring. Roll of hundreds thick as a phone book. Business cards from women whose husbands don't know their wives have business cards. Quiet Jimmy produces a rosary, a pocket watch, and 47 cents in change. Minimal. Practical, boring enough to be believable. Big Mike dumps brass knuckles and a switchblade, tools of his trade. Nothing hidden, nothing unexpected. Then Sammy Reed hesitates. 2 seconds. In Bumpy's world, 2 seconds equals a signed confession. Sammy's hand hovers over his jacket pocket. Touches. Withdraws. Touches again. Finally produces a money clip with a roll thick enough to choke a racehorse. That's considerable walking around money for a Tuesday night, Bumpy observes quietly. Payday yesterday, Sammy says too quickly, forgetting Bumpy pays on Fridays. Bumpy nods slowly, filing the lie away like evidence. Here's what happens next. Major collection tomorrow night. 47,000 from all our operations. Frank and Sammy handle it together. He signals toward the corner where his personal tailor steps forward with 2 garment bags. Y'all wear these special suits I had made. The suits arrive perfectly tailored. Expensive fabric. Perfect fit. Frank slides his hands along the sides and discovers every pocket sewn shut. No hiding places, no secrets, just fabric and exposure. Sammy's voice cracks when he realizes. The pockets are sealed. Honest men don't need pockets, Bumpy replies. You carry the money in clear bags. visible, transparent. Let the whole world see what you're carrying. Frank accepts this as another test in discipline and visibility. But Sammy keeps asking questions, keeps suggesting they could hide the money better, keeps touching where his pockets used to be, like a man missing essential organs. Before they leave, Bumpy pulls Frank aside. His voice drops to that whisper that sounds like death making appointments. You notice how Sammy kept touching his pocket during the meeting? How he asked 3 times about hiding the money? Frank nods. Bumpy's eyes narrow to slits. Tonight, you gon' learn the difference between a soldier and a rat. And depending on what you learn, one of y'all ain't coming back from this run. November 14th, 1955, 8:47 p.m. The collection run begins on 147th Street, where the autumn wind cuts through Harlem like a knife through silk, and $47,000 waits to test the difference between loyalty and betrayal. Frank Lucas and Sammy Reed stand outside Red's Pool Hall, wearing suits that cost more than most men make in 6 months. Dark wool. Perfect fit. But those sealed pockets transform tailored clothing into psychological torture devices. No place to hide, no place to reach, just fabric and exposure, and the constant awareness that everyone watching knows exactly what you're carrying. Frank feels liberated by the transparency. Sammy looks like a man drowning on dry land. The first collection happens at Willie Red's Policy Bank on 145th Street. $12,300 in small bills, rubber banded into stacks that smell like hope and desperation. Willie counts it twice, hands it over with shaking fingers, watches them place it in the clear plastic bag like watching his children leave for war. "Y'all be careful out there," Willie says, meaning the opposite of what his words suggest. Be visible. Be targets. Be lessons for anyone thinking about touching Bumpy's money. They walk east toward Lenox Avenue. Every block is a stage. Every corner is an audience. The clear bag catches streetlight like an aquarium full of paper fish. People see them coming from 3 blocks away. Some cross the street. Smart people. Others stare with the kind of hunger that precedes violence. That's when Sammy starts talking. His voice too casual, hands constantly touching where his pockets used to be like a man missing vital organs. "You know, Frank," he says, eyes darting to the money bag, "Bumpy wouldn't miss 100 or 2. Man's got so much cash he probably don't even count it all. We're taking all the risk here. Maybe we deserve a little tip for our trouble." Frank says nothing, just walks, watches, learns. The silent man lives. Second collection, the numbers runners on 125th Street, $14,900. The bag grows heavier, more visible, more tempting. Sammy keeps suggesting they could skim a little off the top, keeps revealing himself like a man undressing in public without realizing he's naked. "Just enough for our trouble," Sammy continues, voice gaining confidence. "Dangerous work deserves danger pay, right? Bumpy don't need to know every detail." Frank finally speaks. Bumpy pays what Bumpy pays, that's the deal. Sammy laughs nervously, a dry cracking sound. "You really that loyal? Man don't even know if you breathing most days. That's why I'm still breathing," Frank replies. Third collection. Protection money from the social clubs on 132nd Street. $8,600. The bag is getting difficult to carry now. Dead weight that attracts dead men. Sammy's behavior becomes increasingly erratic. He keeps checking his watch like a man late for his own funeral. Keeps looking for places to hide money, frustrated by the sealed pockets that force complete transparency. Fourth collection. The card games behind Murphy's Tavern on 138th Street. $11,200. The bag is full now, heavy as a body, visible as blood. Sammy is sweating despite the November cold, constantly touching where his pockets should be, constantly suggesting they could stash some cash somewhere safe. They cut through Marcus Garvey Park because it's faster and because Sammy keeps insisting they need to hurry. The park at night is bad ground. Too much cover. Too many blind corners. Frank knows this. So does Sammy. So does everyone with an instinct for survival. The ambush happens at 117 near the basketball courts. 3 figures step out from behind parked cars. Long coats. Hats pulled low, guns already drawn. No ski masks this time. These aren't amateurs looking for quick cash. These are hungry professionals with steady hands and desperate eyes. Drop the bags. Now. Frank doesn't drop anything. He dives left behind a parked DeSoto, pulling the .38 from his waistband. The sealed pockets don't matter when you carry your weapon where it counts. He fires twice, controlled shots. Disciplined. One man staggers back, clutching his shoulder. Another bolts down the block. But in the chaos, Frank sees it like slow motion. Sammy isn't shooting back. He's scrambling behind a trash can, and in the confusion, he takes one of the money bags, the smallest one containing exactly $4,000 from the tavern collection, and deliberately slides it under the rear tire of a rusted Oldsmobile. Not accidentally, not in panic. Deliberately. Planning to retrieve it later. Planning to tell Bumpy the stick-up men took it. The third robber fires wild and retreats, knowing this noise will bring cops and questions. In under 2 minutes, it's over. The street smells like cordite and cold air, and the kind of betrayal that leaves permanent stains. Frank stands slowly, chest heaving, ears ringing. Sammy's breathing fast, hands shaking, eyes darting between Frank and the hidden money, like a man caught between confession and damnation. You see that? Sammy pants, voice cracking. We almost died. Money could have gone anywhere in that chaos. Probably scattered when we hit the ground. Some of it might have gotten lost. Frank looks right at him. Then at the Oldsmobile. Then back to him. He doesn't expose the lie. Not yet. He just notes the license plate, the exact position of the bag, the look in Sammy's eyes, a mix of terror and calculation that reveals everything Bumpy suspected. As they collect themselves, Sammy starts rehearsing his story, getting louder, getting more confident in his deception. We tell Bumpy we lost a bag in the shootout, he suggests, gaining momentum. We got jumped. We fought back like soldiers. Money scattered during the gunfight. That's believable, right? He can't blame us for that. We're heroes. Frank lets him talk. The more Sammy explains, the guiltier he sounds, the more he reveals about his true nature. While Sammy's back is turned, checking the street for witnesses, Frank doubles back to the Oldsmobile. He retrieves the hidden bag and slides it inside his jacket, the only place it fits with sealed pockets. The weight presses against his ribs like evidence against a guilty man's conscience. Fifth and final collection. The remaining money from the after-hours joints on 140th Street. Frank adds the last stack to the visible bag, bringing the total to exactly $47,000. All accounted for, all visible except for the one bag that proves everything. The walk back to Red's Pool Hall is the longest mile of Sammy Reed's life. He keeps checking his watch, keeps suggesting they go back and look for the money that got lost, keeps touching where his pockets used to be, like a man missing vital organs. We should search for that bag, he insists, voice getting higher. Maybe it's still there. Maybe the wind didn't blow it away. We owe it to Bumpy to try. Frank understands now. The entire evening was theater. Bumpy knew Sammy was the rat, knew he'd try to steal during chaos, designed the sealed pockets and the transparent bags, and even the ambush to force Sammy to reveal himself completely. The test wasn't about collecting money. It was about watching a thief expose his nature when he thought nobody was looking. They descend the basement stairs at 2:34 a.m. The air gets colder with each step. The smell of stale cigarettes and impending judgment rises to meet them. That same bare bulb swings from a wire like a hanged man's rope. That same wooden table waits like an altar. Bumpy Johnson sits in the shadows, hands folded, eyes heavy with knowledge. He's been waiting, knowing, testing. Frank places the clear bags on the table. The money sits there, transparent and honest. Then, meeting Bumpy's eyes directly, Frank reaches inside his jacket and produces the fourth bag, the one Sammy tried to hide, the one that proves everything about loyalty and betrayal, and the price of having pockets full of other people's money. Sammy's face drains of color like water from a broken glass. In that instant, he understands. Frank saw everything. Frank retrieved everything. Frank chose not to expose him during the collection, but he chose to expose him now, in front of the king. 47,000, Frank says quietly. All accounted for. Bumpy begins counting. The room fills with the sound of rustling bills and heavy breathing and the weight of consequences that have been building for 8 years. Each bill whispers secrets. Each stack tells stories about the difference between soldiers and rats, between loyalty and greed, between men who deserve to live and men who've already chosen to die. The test is reaching its conclusion, and Frank Lucas is learning the most important lesson of his life, that trust isn't measured by what a man says when the sun is shining, but by what he does when the lights go out and his back's against the wall. Sammy Reed made his choice in that park. Frank Lucas made his in this basement. Only one of them understood what Bumpy really meant about pockets. November 14th, 1955. 3:17 a.m. The basement beneath Red's Pool Hall. Bumpy Johnson finishes counting the last stack of bills with fingers that move like a precision instrument. Methodical, deliberate, revealing nothing. $47,000 spread across the wooden table like evidence at a trial where the verdict was decided before the gavel fell. The silence presses against concrete walls like a held breath. Frank stands on one side of the table, hands empty and visible. Sammy Reed stands on the other, trembling despite the expensive suit, sweat beading on his forehead in the November cold. The bare bulb swings overhead, casting shadows that dance like guilty consciences. Bumpy looks up slowly, first at the money, then at Frank. Finally at Sammy, whose 8 years of loyalty are about to be weighed against one night of betrayal. All here, Bumpy says softly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Tell me what happened on that collection run. This is Frank's impossible choice. The moment that separates kings from everyone else. He could lie to protect Sammy, showing misplaced loyalty that would mark him as weak. He could tell the complete truth, making him a snitch who runs to authority instead of handling problems himself. Or he could demonstrate that he learned Bumpy's real lesson about power and responsibility. Frank chooses the fourth option that only future kings understand. Sammy tried to steal, he says, voice flat as a death certificate. I stopped him. The money's all here. What happens next is up to you, not me. No excuses, no embellishment, no begging for credit. Just the facts and the understanding that a king handles problems in the field, then reports results, not complaints. Bumpy nods once, slow and deliberate. That single nod is both coronation and death sentence. You see that, Sammy? Bumpy gestures toward Frank without taking his eyes off his accountant. That's how a king handles betrayal. Not by running to me like a child tattling to his father, not by participating in the theft like a co-conspirator, by solving the problem himself, then bringing me the complete picture. Bumpy stands, each movement calculated as a chess master positioning pieces for checkmate. I've been knowing about your skimming for 6 months, Sammy. Every dollar you thought you was clever enough to hide. Tonight wasn't about catching you, I already caught you months ago. Tonight was about giving you one final chance to prove you was worth saving, and testing whether Frank understood what I'd been teaching him about trust and power. The revelation hits like a sledgehammer. Frank realizes the entire evening was choreographed theater. The sealed pockets, the transparent bags, even the ambush near Marcus Garvey Park, all designed to force character to reveal itself under pressure. Sammy's face crumbles like wet newspaper. 8 years of history evaporating in 8 seconds of truth. Desperation makes men do desperate mathematics. From his sock, the only hiding place left with sealed pockets, Sammy pulls a small .22 revolver. His hand shakes as the barrel rises toward Bumpy's chest. Frank moves like water. No hesitation. No thought. Just training and instinct compressed into 2 seconds of controlled violence. He grabs Sammy's wrist, twists until bone grinds against bone, and the .22 clatters across concrete. He pins Sammy against the wall, not choking, not breaking, just controlling completely. "Don't," Frank says quietly. "You got daughters. This is the moment Bumpy's been waiting for." Frank disarmed a threat without killing, showed mercy without showing weakness. Understood that unnecessary violence is just another form of losing control. Bumpy reaches into his jacket and produces an envelope. He places it beside the $47,000. $5,000, he says to Sammy. "For your daughter's medical bills. The reason you started stealing in the first place. You got 24 hours to leave New York. Go west. Go south. Go somewhere I'll never hear your name again. You do that, you live. You stay, you die." Simple mathematics. Sammy collapses, sobbing now, understanding he's receiving mercy he doesn't deserve from a king who could have buried him without a second thought. "I ain't in the business of killing desperate fathers," Bumpy tells Frank, his voice carrying decades of hard-earned wisdom. "I'm in the business of building kings. Remember that when your time comes." Sammy takes the envelope with shaking hands and stumbles up the basement stairs, leaving behind 8 years of history and a future that will never include Harlem again. Flash forward 13 years. 1968. Frank Lucas stands in a warehouse in Southeast Asia, watching pure heroin being packaged into military coffins bound for America. He runs the most sophisticated drug operation in history, Blue Magic, 98% pure, bypassing the Italian mafia completely. He moves invisibly through the world, internalized every lesson Bumpy taught him. The silent man lives. Never trust a man with pockets. Respect costs nothing. Fear costs everything. But there's a cost nobody mentioned in that basement classroom. Frank trusts no one completely. Not his brothers who work for him. Not his wife who sleeps beside him. Not his closest lieutenants who would die for him. Every man is a potential Sammy Reed, waiting for the right price to justify betrayal. His empire is built on the principle that every human being will eventually betray you if the price is right. So Frank compartmentalizes every operation, keeps every secret in a different place that no single person can access. The paranoia that keeps him alive is the same paranoia that makes him alone. Frank Lucas sits in a cell that measures 8 by 10 feet, convicted on 70 counts of conspiracy to distribute narcotics. 15 years of empire reduced to concrete walls and iron bars. The king without a kingdom, reflecting on the night that made him everything and cost him everything. He thinks about that basement, the test, the lesson about pockets that built his empire and destroyed his soul. "Bumpy taught me never to trust a man with pockets," Frank whispers to the empty room, his voice barely audible above the prison's mechanical breathing. He was right. But he never taught me how to trust a man without them. He looks at his own hands. Empty. Open. Honest. Maybe that's why empires fall, he says, the realization echoing off cold walls. Not because of what men hide, but because of what they can't reveal. You build a world where nobody trusts nobody, eventually you just the king of an empty room. The greatest lesson becomes the greatest curse. The discipline that made him untouchable made him unreachable. The paranoia that protected him from betrayal protected him from connection. The sealed pockets that forced transparency created a man who could never be transparent about anything that mattered. Bumpy Johnson taught Frank Lucas how to be a king, but nobody teaches you how to be human when being human means being vulnerable, and being vulnerable means being dead. So the question lands in your lap, echoing through decades and prison walls. In a world where survival requires absolute paranoia, is it possible to build anything that lasts? Or is the throne always the loneliest place on earth? Was it worth it? The power, the money, the legend, the respect? Was building an empire worth becoming a man who could never trust anyone enough to share it with? The silent man lives. But does he ever really live at all?